To order. We good, gentlemen?
Yep.
All right, everyone, welcome. First order of business is the October 12th minutes. Let's read them forward. A motion.
I will do it.
Move to approve.
Move to approve.
Second. Is there discussion? All right, all in favor? Aye. Right. Are there any matters that are not listed on the agenda? Excellent.
Is there public comment or is there no one? Is there anyone online who wants to speak?
Thank you for checking, Richie. All right, Scott. Item number 4, or James.
Yeah, I'll take this. So the Nidri Farm, you may remember from last week, we presented that to the board and there's approval for that, and Lisa Hawkins is here representing the donor. She has experience in conservation easements in her practice. She was unable to be here. The landowner was trying to attend from the Zoom format, was unable to do that. So there were some issues that they wanted to clear up. That's why we came back before the board on just a couple of matters. So again, to refresh your memory, the Nidri Farm down southern part of the county, a lot of the historic buildings. So I direct your attention to the bottom right there. The 3 structures we're going to talk about. The red circle is the firehouse. For your orientation, you'll see the big white is the barn, and then that kind of equestrian area we were talking about before. And then also the circles to the right, cottage 1 and cottage 2 on the top right. We originally presented those with the square footage as being existing dwellings. There's also, you remember, existing dwelling in that barn, we call it the groom's quarters, but we didn't allow for any expansion of those existing structures. So there was some concern in moving forward. I think the gentleman was interested in maybe, you see the bottom left there, the renovations underway when I was out there, but in the future, just having quarters suitable for farm work or whatever the case might be. The top right was the old photos taken from some of the historic resource inventory. It was the cottage again, that both of these there want to have some provision to be able to expand on those. We didn't find any real problem with that. I think the historic resource folks are, again, I think the landowner is interested in maintaining the historic integrity of the property, but the proposal that I think you saw with Ms. Hawkins' memo was the allowance to expand those cottages as shown there on the top left, to allow the cottages to be expanded up to, I guess, 1,800 square feet, and if replaced up to 2,000. And I think also what you may remember is this large envelope is encompasses that entire sort of farm building equestrian area. So I think that's what we're asking the board to consider. And then the other item was that carriage house, or the firehouse, referred to a couple of different terms, but the landowner had indicated that he may want to convert that into a residence or some point. I don't know if there's anything further you had to share, but those are the couple items that we wanted to clarify before we finalize any of the documentation for the deed.
What did we approve the last meeting?
We approved the existing cottages, but there was no provision for any expansion at all.
And what is the existing square footage?
So I actually had a correction to that from so if you went back to your first slide.
Go back one, James.
Yeah.
That's why I asked.
So I had the very first slide showed the existing square footage, because there was actually an error in that. So listed there as the existing, the 2566. Showing that as being 2,000 square feet is inaccurate. That one of those existing structures is 800 square feet approximately, and the other is approximately 1,000 square feet. The Department of Historic Resources approved renovations that are underway are adding a patio to each of those cottages and adding a bathroom to one of them. But that is the extent of that beyond the repair work. I mean, one literally had a tree lay across the roof. So other than repairs, so I did want to point out that one structure is closer to 1,000 square feet currently than 2,000 square feet currently.
So that's 2566.
I'm not sure that's the address. I think part of the confusion is there were 2 additional residences within that village core area that had addresses that are no longer in existence. And if you actually look at the GIS, it still shows those 911 addresses sort of floating out there in the woods and in that area. And I believe that may have been one of those houses, but it is no longer in existence on the property.
So these cottages, what is their importance to the contribution of the historical nature of this property? It doesn't appear that they are.
They are in the inventory of the historic resources as contributing, and they listed that as, so I don't know what that means. And we had the debate about, our garden shed is in my backyard might be contributing, but that's, on all their documentation, just many volumes of resources.
So one of those dwellings dates from approximately 1920 and the other dates from approximately 1950. But because they are in sort of the historic core and both of them are within sight distance of the stable, which is the crown jewel of the property, DHR pulled sort of all of the improvements in that area in as contributing, because obviously something happening to one of these in a way could be detrimental to the preservation of the larger historic significance of the farm core improvements that are.
I mean, I don't
located
think
there.
we'd want to see them replaced with something grossly larger, but they don't look like much in the way of structures to me.
So
So how they get refurbished or even replaced, I'm not sure we care. But we don't want them replaced with 5,000 square foot houses, right? So I think a reasonable size is really all we ought to be.
Right.
Concerned.
2,000 square feet.
So we proposed 1,800 square feet and I actually came at that number by looking at the information that was presented to you. So that your assumption was there was about 3,600 square feet of improvements, I believe, there in total with between those two. So I literally took that and divided it in half and said, okay, 1,800 per would be consistent with what you thought you were approving before with their existing square footage. So I was trying to sort of be in balance and in speaking with my client, he felt that that square footage would be appropriate for his intended use for these, which is farm housing. They are fully committed to restoring the historic structures and the functionality of this property as an equestrian operation of significance. And in order to do that, they will need to have live-in farm support and need to have viable homes. And an 800 square foot home may be great for a single farmhand, but have a couple of babies and suddenly you're in need of a little more room. He wants to have the flexibility. We also provided that we weren't asking for permission to demolish those. Quite frankly, we won't be able to. The tax credit money is being used to rehab them. So, right. So, so we weren't asking for permission to demolish them, but say a lightning strikes as it does, and one of them burns down. We did ask for flexibility to be able to rebuild that in another location within that building envelope. Perhaps that could be more functional. Perhaps even in one of the locations where one of the other houses were. And in that case, we asked for flexibility to go up to 2,000 square feet as opposed to the 1,800.
You're using the term building envelope as within an area that is described.
So On the original proposal, there was sort of a large rectangular building envelope that encompassed what I have called the historic village core that sort of runs through the center of the property and encompasses all of the agricultural buildings as well as these cottages. And so it would be relocated within that area.
I think there was a slide last time that showed that rectangle. But
Right.
can you find?
Yeah,
that
I
again,
got
Jamie?
You'll pardon my scroll.
I hope it's all right if I just jump in and start.
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. I didn't want to present.
Just like the Supreme Court.
If it's good enough for the,
DCR have
There
any
it is.
requirement for the 1800?
Yeah,
Square
that's it.
feet?
Oh, you mean the Department of Historic Resources?
Yeah, that's right.
So
Same
at
concept,
this point in time, he would have, for us to do anything more than what's already been approved, which is adding a bathroom to one and patios to both, we would have to go back to the Department of Historic Resources and obtain their permission to do anything more at this point.
I'm just thinking from this body's point of view, monitoring purposes, we have one stage, it's 1800, and then you get to another stage and it's potentially 2000. Is there anything detrimental to your client if this body just adopted a 2000 square foot limit?
No, not at all. In fact, I'm sure he would be thrilled.
I think so too. Because that gives them the flexibility to add that, to take the existing structure up to 2000,
Correct.
just to be clear, okay?
but we're just talking about the two cottages right now.
Right.
That is correct.
So is that the rectangle, that sort of
Yes.
interior piece there?
Black.
Yes,
And so both cottages are within that,
correct.
kind of up on the top.
They are really, so sort of one is just to the sort of south of the main stable and one is up in the woods on the other
On that left-hand
side.
top.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
mhm, On the other side of the stable. They're sort of
Yeah.
there you go, perfect. That will show them. So one is number 6 on that drawing and one is number 19 on that drawing. So one is right, very close proximity, almost directly across Niagara Drive from the main stable. The other is across the, up in those woods. There you go. Up, yeah, right there, number 6, right there.
Yeah. Relative perspective, the greater scheme of the whole property, it's pretty condensed right there.
And Richie, in your little sidebar conversation there, were you saying 2000 square feet for both structures?
Both structures, you're not making a distinction between current expansion and then an expansion if it gets destroyed. So you're just making it 2000 square feet.
Instead of the 1800?
I'm just trying to think monitoring. type-
2,000 square feet per structure.
Per.
4,000.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get at.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Versus that sequential 18 to 2.
Yeah, I just didn't know, if they built it at 1900 square feet now, and we go out there and say you have to take 100 off and then something, then it burns it down. Like, well, now we can do 2000.
Right.
Just stupid as shoot things.
Like a lawyer there,
aren't
you? Both sides.
Would you like a motion?
Absolutely.
I
You're
would
gonna send Bill
propose
something
You have
for
it,
that.
no, but you have another part, don't you?
We do have a second part.
Is there anything about, are we making a decision about the firehouse now too, or was it just cottages?
No, so it was also the firehouse, and this was an oversight on my part. So I was not aware from my conversations with my client that there was the potential for future residential use of that structure. That is not what is currently planned. I think he's looking at other potential uses for that right now. It could be a gym, could be a number of other things relating to the operations of the farm. But again, as he's looking at increasing staffing, he was looking at ways to have additional housing options that didn't involve additional construction. This was a carriage house. It is ideally situated for residential conversion. And so he wanted to have the flexibility to do that if the need in the future arises.
And is Historic Resources concerned about changes to the facade of this house or anything
So
about-
this is a contributing structure in the historic district. It is being renovated with historic tax credits as we speak. And so I believe what we were offering or what we indicated was we are not anticipating any exterior modifications except in compliance with the historic renovation guidelines of DCR. There are existing doors and other things that would, you know, be functional here for residents. We're not talking about expansion of the exterior facade or footprint of the structure. We're talking about interior use. But that interior modification would require Department of Historic Resources approval because it's been renovated with historic tax credit
And
dollars.
did we talk about this structure being a residence last time? I honestly don't remember.
We did not, because I was not aware that was in the back of the owner's mind and had not ferreted that out until after the meeting, and we were talking about the other cottages. And he raised the issue of the carriage house, firehouse conversion, and I said, we need to go back. That wasn't presented to the committee. And I want to make sure that it's clear and in talking with the staff that they felt that needed to come back before the committee, since it wasn't clear that a residential use could be permitted there.
So how do we feel about that?
I'd feel fine about having this being a dwelling versus having potential of another dwelling of unknown design and character and placement. You know, this is already, we know what it looks like, we know where it is.
And how many total dwellings is that now, absent the lots that might get cut off and sold away as individuals?
So there are the two existing cottages that we just spoke of.
Right.
Then there is groom's quarters that is located in
In the barn.
in the barn. Then there would be this carriage house, firehouse, if that's approved as a potential dwelling, would be 4. And those are all within the core village area. Then what we had approved at the last meeting was one residential structure up to 10,000 square feet, which would be the main home to be constructed on the parcel, and up to 3 additional parcel home dwellings of up to 4,500 square feet is my recollection, 4,500 square feet. So that would be a total of 8 dwellings on the property.
The core piece, not the.
No,
No, on the entire almost 600 acres of property, that would be 8 dwellings permitted. Of those 8 dwellings, 2 of them would be located in the interior of existing historic structures that don't look like houses.
I'd have a concern that the dwelling right ascribed to the firehouse sticks with the firehouse and doesn't if we could put language in there to make sure that also it doesn't get traded out and end up as seen as, oh,
That is
drop another.
not a
you know,
problem.
just
That is
protective language,
not the intent at all. So
Right.
that is not an issue.
understand.
So it can be replaced. It can't be intentionally destroyed. If it is destroyed by fire, it can be replaced, but it can't be moved.
Right.
Is that right?
Sounds good enough.
So would that mean that just to clarify that if it was lost and replaced, do we want to give it that same 2,000? Because I think it's like 1,900
Yes.
right now.
I don't know how big it is.
It's 1900.
The
I
fire,
measured that off of the floor plan.
carriage firehouse is. I don't know how big.
It says 1922.
An issue. May I raise
Yeah.
a tangential issue? You were not here last time, but there was some concern. The owner's current intention is to return this to equestrian use. But the owner is aware of our no commercial use restrictions.
Absolutely, and I've discussed this with them. They are not event center, wedding venue, these are horse people. They want to put an equestrian operation. They want to restore this property to not the level. I mean, I think historically, this was, the race horses, they had hundreds of employees. That is not what we're talking about, but they want this will be an equestrian operation. That is their passion. That is their vision for this farm.
The issue is not likely to be with this owner, but it might be at the time of sale in the future. And particularly relevant because there was a plan to develop this as a rural office park,
Okay,
using the stalls as cubicles for a rural office It was marketed for that purpose.
Wow.
It's not permitted under zoning.
Detailed.
That could perhaps explain why it wasn't purchased under that,
Yeah.
under the marketing, under that vision. But no, they are investing substantial dollars to restore the equestrian facilities, expand them with the addition of riding rings and other facilities. That is their vision for this property. And the restrictions that are in your template, I have reviewed with my client, and he does not have concerns with those as it relates to commercial use. His only question that he asked me regarding that was, well, you know, if I rent out something, isn't that a commercial use? And I said, well, okay, if you're renting something for residential use, that's considered a residential use. And if you're renting it for an equestrian use, that's considered an equestrian use. Generating income in the form of rent would not convert something to a commercial use. And we may want to add some clarifying language to that point, but I think conceptually, that's where his mind was. He's not at all thinking about anything beyond that. And I think the language in your template will protect against your concern relating to future owners and commercial uses.
So his use for equestrian would be all that he's allowed to do by right, given the zoning that and the
Yeah.
equestrian uses that he wants to do.
He could have a boarding business.
He could have a boarding
Yeah.
business and perhaps and likely will have a boarding business. They could provide riding lessons, sort of those types of activities. My understanding from conversations with the staff is those are considered equestrian uses, customary and reasonable, consistent with Albemarle County equestrian operations in general, and would not be considered a commercial use that would violate the easement.
Right.
It's a by right use under zoning, and we've always interpreted our easements to be that, I mean, that falls under agriculture.
And it's an ideal use, particularly for this property.
What about horse shows?
I was just about to say, we're gonna
Because,
build grandstands and.
well, no, I mean, seriously, are they anticipating a horse show? Because that can be quite commercial.
Yeah,
Is it
so
like all the tents and all the vendors sometimes?
I have not discussed that with them specifically. I know that the Department of Historic Resources does not will not allow the construction of grandstands. So that is not a part of what will be built there in terms of those riding rings and so forth. I know they're planning to add some paddocks and some other things relating to their operations. They may want to have some horse shows, but again, I think that those would fall under the temporary event limitations and provisions in your easement that allow for certain temporary outdoor activities that, correct?
That don't
It
modify
allows,
the structures. of the property.
Correct.
allows for small scale commercial operations, events, or not, it's not industrial, provided they're incidental to and compatible with the activities set forth in A, which is agriculture and equine activities. And receive the grantee's prior written approval as consistent with conservation purposes.
So probably not a
May
class.
require
Right?
Exactly. it's not
Rolex
myself.
is already looking at it.
Because the grandstands can be temporary.
So a small scale commercial operation such as that may require the owners to come back to this body and get written permission.
Okay,
So if
So-
they were to say, we're gonna have grandstands and tents and
Vendors.
elephants and vendors, this body could say no.
They'll know what a class A horse show is.
all right. I have not gotten any sense that that is something that they are contemplating, but I appreciate the clarification. I'll make sure that I have that conversation with them.
These are the rabbit holes that we go down
Yeah.
sometimes, just to make sure that they don't become groundhog holes. Trip us up in the future.
Where does the 20,000 square foot indoor ring go?
So there was a plan, I believe, that was presented last time, that showed the location. It is located within that large rectangular building
Oh, it is?
envelope. It
Okay.
is directly across from
The barn.
the barn. There's an indoor and an outdoor riding rings that were shown on.
Yeah, we had an image of it earlier this evening.
Yeah, so if you go back to the one that had all my little notes as to where different things were located within
Yeah.
this area, it showed the proposed sites for.
The one above it. Is that it? No.
No,
We looked at before.
It's where the walls of the barn were white. Like Castle mentioned.
Do you know
Might
offhand
have been-
the approximate area of the rectangle?
I know that it is a 10,000 square foot indoor riding ring.
But the.
Oh, there it
No,
is.
the building, the
rectangle
footprint.
There it
would be-
is.
Or the,
Yeah,
And-
so those are the indoor and outdoor riding rings that are proposed.
oh, okay, the ones at the top side by side.
So
So the arena,
Correct.
that arena where the cursor is 20,000 square feet.
So
That's
that's-
10,000 square feet. I
That's
believe that's the
That's
that's
the
the
indoor.
indoor. And then that would be the outdoor right next to it,
That's quite close then to
to the existing structures. Correct.
yeah, it's very nicely done.
Big enough for arena pool.
Would you like a motion?
Let me ask staff, have you guys finished your presentation? And do you have a recommendation?
Yes, it's before you there, sir.
A motion would be fantastic.
For the clarification, it is for cottage one to be expanded to 20,000 to 2,000.
20.
2,000 in its existing location. Cottage two likewise up to 2,000 in its existing location, and the barn and the firehouse rebuild. Converted to use as a dwelling and rebuilt on site should be lost.
So it would stay at its current size. If
And
destroyed, then it could be replaced at 2,000.
Yes,
And they have the option to convert it to a dwelling
Present.
present.
Replacement in the same site.
yes.
Site.
Just to keep it simple. Do these structures all have septic fields, individual septic fields, I presume?
And there's plenty of.
Oh, so
Daylight, ditches.
to clarify that. So if I may, for clarification, so I understand. On the firehouse, if it were, heaven forbid, destroyed by fire. And he were to rebuild it, convert it to a dwelling, does that dwelling have to be in the same footprint, or could that be located elsewhere within the building envelope? That's my question.
Yeah, what's the term we use? 1 foot on base.
Is the carriage house different than the firehouse, or are they?
No,
the
They're the
same?
same,
Same thing.
they've been used for both of those purposes historically.
I think our intention was to have it in the same place. But obviously, since it's bigger, it's not gonna be the same footprint.
No, it's the same, it's gonna be 2,000 square feet regardless, isn't that what it is now?
1922.
Oh, all right. Well,
Well, it's not our concern, but there is a potential IRS issue that's moved.
And I don't know if there's anything particularly important about that location, but I think we just need to tie down if we mean it needs to be in the same location. Or if it just needs to be within that
The
larger
envelope.
envelope.
I'm happy with it being within the envelope.
same with, I guess I don't really care.
Right.
I would agree. We have no willful destruction also.
There's no
Yes.
willful destruction. And,
Right.
and the concern I would have with a restriction on it being, as I'm thinking about this, sorry, it's taking me a minute. In the same footprint is, if it's being replaced, that is really at the heart and center of the historic core where all of the
Yeah.
key historic structures are. And if you're building a new construction, it actually might be preferable to locate it a little more distance from that historic core if it isn't, just so that you're not taking away from the integrity of the other
Yeah.
historic structures. That would be my only
Put it
concern.
behind the indoor arena.
No willful demolition or destruction, but if it's destroyed, it has to be replaced within the core village envelope.
This is a fantastic piece.
Yes.
Great.
Is that the motion? Is that the motion on the floor?
Yes.
Rescue.
Yeah. Is there a second to Dr.
Second.
Moses? Right. So further discussion. All in favor?
I,
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed.
Thank you.
Thank you all for your consideration and your willingness to explore preserving this very special corner of Albemarle County.
absolutely.
Great.
Thank you for bringing it to us.
Yes, thank you very much.
Please thank the landowners for us.
I will do that.
I'm a neighbor. We'll look forward to meeting.
Oh, they're lovely. Yeah, you're gonna enjoy being neighbors.
We do have another item. We have landowner here. So I'm gonna go ahead and move along. This is a proposal to do some timbering operation. And the gentleman brought this before inquiry to the county as he recognized that there is a rural preservation development easement that was granted in 1983 as part of the Far Hills subdivision. There was, I guess, some denser clustering, and then this was the preservation tract. So we had indicated he would need to have a forestry plan. And I think he's already had that in the works, that he was in consultation with the Department of Forestry. So simply, they had recommended in this forest stand plan, which I think you had an opportunity to review, was they recommended clear cutting this specific area, which I'll show you. It's the loblolly pine. Mr. Adam Bechtel is here. He met me on the property, walked me around a little bit. So on the left, you see there the plan that was submitted by the Department of Forestry, the loblolly there. I thought it is significant to note that the property is fairly remote from the stream resource. If you see on the bottom left there, I measured off, it's like a 600-foot distance, and there's a pretty stout crossing there. And if you see that picture on the top left, that stand is the 600 feet back up into the distance. There's where this stand of loblolly is. And on the bottom right, just to show you sort of give you a perspective of the height of those trees. I don't know if you had additional questions for the landowner, but that's we found this would be consistent with the conditions of the easement, but we need the board to act on it to allow him to proceed.
So the area to be timbered is just that core area of the loblolly pines
Yes, sir.
That is correct.
that we can, yeah. So it's kind of the hole in the donut, so to speak.
Except that the, while it's one property, the easement only applies to about the southern half there. That upper angled piece is not under the easement.
Okay. But just to be clear, the part we're talking about clear cutting is that center portion.
Yes, the orange circle.
30 acres. Why are you undertaking this?
I mean, the ultimate goal is, I mean, I can't build on that parcel, so I'm just trying to do some habitat restoration. I'd like to get hardwood stand in there. But the Department of Forestry rep came out and there's some pretty significant infestation of pine bark beetle. It was planted in timber, it wasn't appropriately thinned. And he said, you know, if I leave it, it's gonna just cause a real management problem because it's starting to collapse on itself and then they're falling over. And so he said, the best course of action if you want to restore deciduous hardwood is to replant it in pine, then come in and do a selective thinning about 10 years later. And the seed bank in there for hardwoods needs like 65 to 85% shade to germinate. This is what he told me. So I'm just kind of going off his recommendation.
Have the rest of the RPD, have the structures been built?
Oh, yeah, this was done back in the early 90s. It's well established.
Yeah, I don't believe I have any building permits on that parcel.
Yeah, this wasn't.
Not if it's a preservation parcel.
Well, usually they do allow one dwelling, so if you had 20 total rights on a property, and you did an RPD, you'd get 19 small lots and then a preservation tract with a house, because
But it
the
has
original
to,
theory was that it was the farm owner who was doing this, and so they could keep their farm growing. I think this particular one didn't allow that there was a variation on it. It didn't actually allow a dwelling on this preservation tract, if I remember right.
Scott's right, I read in section 6, no permanent or temporary building or structure shall be built or maintained other than farm buildings and structures, where dwellings not permitted.
So that's sort of a separate issue, but there is an existing structure that I'm kind of curious what I'm allowed to do with. It's sort of fallen into some disrepair, but it's still viable structurally, and I'd like to breathe some life back into it if I can. I mean, not for residents, but as a agricultural structure. I'm just curious what kind of limitations there are on that.
James, did you see it out there?
Yes.
What are your thoughts?
I don't know if that's specific, it's located here. I don't know if you could see my cursor down in that open area. I did take a photo of it.
So Richie, it can be anything but a house, basically.
They have to be farm buildings or structures.
And
I mean, I guess if everything but a house is a farm structure.
Can there be power? Yeah, there's not power currently.
Like a generator building, which I think.
I mean, I have to run, Dominion is running a line up under the stream through the preservation tract and up to that top parcel where I'm gonna be building. So it wouldn't be difficult to just create a hole there for that structure.
I don't think it
by the
matters that
road.
it has power.
I don't think so either.
Alright,
Dominion Power is running a line.
I knew that was good.
What
I
kind
don't
of
see
line?
any restriction.
I wanna do underground, it's my understanding that's an additional expense, but I don't.
It's just to serve the lot where you're gonna build a house.
Yes.
Right.
I
So
don't see any restriction
Did that
against
become
bringing
a-
utilities onto the property. To serve the property.
But they're doing it to sort of adjacent property.
Are they doing that
Yeah, I mean,
already?
It's just an easy, accessing through the under.
There's an existing easement.
no,
We don't usually,
It's only when they're
This might be
doing
an issue.
transmission across a property that we get into that situation where we have to establish.
Yes, but the form they're using permits unlimited use of new easement is granted. The language of the new easements they're using for new residential properties gives them broad authority to run to adjacent structures and to do above ground transformer location, switching locations.
Being real fast.
So is Dominion doing the work right now?
I mean, I just pulled a work order number like 3 days ago, so they haven't been out yet, but.
if they had to go around this parcel for some reason, could they do that?
Well, it would require another landowner granting permission for access. So there's a property off of Catlin Road that borders the upper parcel, which actually would be a lot closer. But it's, I can't guarantee that they will allow that, so that's what we're shooting for. It would be a lot less expensive. to
Can
do it that way.
Can it run up the property line rather than cut through it? I'm just thinking of ways to minimize the impact of the.
I mean, I can't really speak to that. I'm not an electrical guy. I'm sure they could do it, probably.
I mean, there is a 50-foot wide access
Yeah, there's an
Through
access easement. I don't know. if
property
it
to access the back.
Versus our mechanism to deal with VDOT situation.
We have not, well, in the past, when we've had this utility easement issue, Scott, correct me if I'm wrong. We've not objected to underground traversal as long as the above ground land is returned to its prior appearance.
And if they don't put transfer station or
Yeah, I don't remember. I'm sorry. I would have to go back and look.
Well, that's what we articulate. If Sherry were here, she would remember. She was the,
She's probably done it more often.
well, she was the advocate for that position, that for a property we have under easement, unless there is specific language in the deed, what we would permit is an underground line as long as there is no above ground alteration to the above ground appearance. A pole doesn't qualify. And that is a big issue in the current environment.
Alright, let's,
I'm not sure we can resolve this because we don't have any information from the utility.
But this is related to the question of the clearing. Your plan is to timber the property or to burn?
Timber cut.
It's just that specified stand.
Not to burn.
Just the timber track.
yeah, let's get back to the clearing and then we'll
We may have to,
put a pin in
talk to-
the,
we may need to talk again, get more
the
information from the
committee.
utility and come back. Our building issues. I'm not sure we can resolve that today.
I mean, that's a side issue. You know, that'd be long term.
Is this the structure you were?
That's the barn,
referring
yeah,
to?
beautiful little, old historic property that structured. Pretty-
Yeah, it'd be nice to fix that up and use it for something.
Yeah, and that's clearly permitted. as a farm. So anyway,
two things going on here are
Approving the
the
timbering.
the timbering. And are, it seems like these two pieces are separate. I think that we can make a decision on the timbering, and then we need to figure out a direction, a course of action to understand what's going on.
I think,
with the-
I think James and I are gonna have to talk to somebody at Dominion, figure out what exactly they want to do, and then we can just bring it back
Okay,
if it turns out to be necessary.
okay, that sounds good.
Let me just have one question
Yes.
related to both, actually. There's an access easement already platted and approved through the property.
Right.
Was that what looked like a road going through?
There's your-
Yeah,
And
With
that
that
was
ridge.
it?
yeah, it's in great shape. I guess it's 50 feet, so it's 25 on either side.
That's what we would, I mean, if we had concerns about
That's,
running a line through there,
that's where they go.
we want them to run it up that.
And that gets pretty close to that barn too. 'Cause it's just-
Yeah,
It's right, yeah, it's right off the road there.
All right, well, let's take care of the timbering thing.
You okay with the timbering? Okay. Is there a motion regarding the timbering? The current proposal.
No, I'm going to reapprove.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Further discussion? Okay, all in favor of approving the timber plan, not timber plan, proposal? All in favor? Aye. Contrary minded? Unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bechtel.
And we can talk soon about the other
Do you have
stuff.
something to add?
Okay.
Nothing.
Will you just send us some documentation?
Oh, sure.
The HOA, just so it's, they have.
Close to.
It's too bad it didn't work to thin that stand now rather than have to cut the whole thing down and
It's
start
been-
all over.
I was in there.
Well, it's just, I think,
It's
you
red.
know, they had to, the people that owned it, they let it, was neglected and it got in the infestation.
Well, I mean, it was a tree farm and then they just stopped tree farming.
Yeah, it's kind of gone fallow. It's a little wild down there right now. But thank you guys so much.
Good luck.
Take care.
I was in there probably 15, 20 years ago and the trees were pretty mature at that point.
Right. Yeah, you know, in 20 years, that'll just be a giant pile of pickup sticks.
Yep.
Yeah, his description was apt when he said that it's caving in on itself.
I understand that.
You're in the line for this meeting.
With the language. Is there any old or new business?
Mr. Chairman, I did have an item for our new business. to
Yes, Mr. Fuller.
Bring before the esteemed panel here. You'll recall, Castlewood out on the Yancey Mills area. And, we had placed in our proposal this terminology here with regard to riparian buffer. And the original proposal text before this board said no dam construction or vehicle crossings. And that was improper because there indeed is a ford, and I did bring this before the board, but it was not included in the motion that this ford would be allowed going forward.
And that's,
Just to clarify, normally that would be permitted
Yeah.
under the template language, so this was presented as an additional restriction, but we shouldn't have gone there because we need to be able to let him keep this.
yeah, because access is a greater piece of the
I
property.
mean, there's that
I remember that.
those buffers break up a lot of areas that anybody farming the place would need to get to, so.
Yeah, that ford is here, so that essentially is dividing the property.
So does he have to go to any state agencies to get permission to improve that ford? Since he's messing around in the stream bottom.
I would think if he were gonna improve it, he would need for permitting, because DMRC says anything over 5 square miles would require. But like a ford for farming, I wouldn't think. An improvement, so I'd say certainly would need additional permitting.
I don't have any
I think
experience.
you have to go to planning if he's gonna do anything. In that zone, at the very least, go to the county and they would direct them.
I had just looked into this on another property and, I don't remember the gentleman's name, but he said. In the agricultural use, any roads, any improvements to agricultural roads, crossings, fords, don't require any permitting, just notify the public board.
Thank you.
If he's asking for permission for a dam also.
No,
No,
Another day.
that was just inclusive in the language.
They had, the proposal had said no stream crossings. And they would just like to strike that as far as I understand.
I think there was consensus among the board, but it didn't get into the actual motion to approve this at the end of the discussion.
Sounds like we don't have any control anyway.
Yeah, it's not our rodeo, so to speak.
I mean, they're asking you to strike the language from the proposal that said no vehicle crossings in this area.
I'm amenable to that.
We could.
Good.
Right.
And sometimes we have, but not.
To zoning or to other, we can have a more restrictive.
Clear on that.
But they're already using this.
It's historic. It's.
And just the way this farm is laid out, I mean, it would be really difficult to manage this farm without crossings.
Okay,
If anything, putting a big culvert and concrete bridge over it would probably be better water quality in the long run.
Okay. And so, folks, if you'll, I beg your indulgence, my original language also says there'll be a riparian buffer on the Stockton Creek, when clearly the buffer is laid out on the Stockton Creek proper there, the larger east-west, but the tributaries also would be included, so.
And they're asking for that to be deleted?
I'm asking that it be clarified.
that the buffers are on all of the streams.
Map
not
says,
just-
see map, the language says Russ Stockton Creek, so again, this is my error, and I'm learning not to make an error because it takes a lot to get that.
So you're asking for the 35-foot riparian buffer to remain.
To apply to
Apply.
the additional fingers there that would not, based on that specific.
To apply to all streams.
Correct.
Or, Stockton Creek and tributaries.
Right.
And that was my own volition to bring that little glitch before this.
All right, it's.
And are those, maybe it doesn't matter, but are those year-round streams, those two tributaries?
Stockton.
That's what I was gonna ask.
Stockton is.
Here's one, I'd say it was mapped as intermittent. And here's Stockton, the main body.
I'm happy with 35-foot buffer regardless.
Mhm.
It's just a clarification.
Okay,
right? Is there anything we need to do or just,
you need a motion.
do we need a motion or anything?
do.
or just
We
clarifying
would
the-
need a motion to remove, or at least to clarify that the prohibition on vehicle crossings is not required. Clarify that there is no prohibition on vehicle crossings in the riparian buffer.
Well, just remove the language.
It could be a motion to approve an amended proposal that removes the vehicle crossings in this area language.
Right, and clarifies that 35-foot buffers are on Stockton Creek and its two tributaries that are on the property.
Sounds like you just made a motion, Mr. Moore.
I did.
Is there a second? Thank you. Is there? Further discussion? All in favor?
I,
Aye.
Thank you, folks.
Thank
That was
you.
the business I had.
All right,
John, you had said Stockton Creek and its tributaries.
One other small thing is I had planned to bring you all an updated accounting of the authority's funds since all of the changes we made in the last couple of meetings. The reporting system is kind of locked down at the moment because they're doing an audit, so I couldn't get you an up-to-date report. All of the changes that you all directed us to do over the last two meetings have been done. I just won't be able to provide you an actual accounting of it based on directly out of the data until next month's meetings. I'll do that.
thanks. All right,
until next time.
till next time, move to adjourn. Bye.
You're an hour.
Do we have anything for next month?
Done.
Believe me, will. There's a couple in the works and they asked to delay, so I'm guessing that means December. So I just can't say for sure. But the anticipation was to have one at a minimum.
Thank you all for everyone. Sure, man. Make the trip in.
Glad to see you.
Everybody.
Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
How about you?